All right, welcome back. I know folks have been waiting. Hey, where's your next layout update? The last full update I did was back in November of 2021. So it's now June the 26th, 2022. So, as the layout has, gotten closer to a finished condition, I really haven't had to do as many frequent updates. But actually, I have done quite a bit of work on the layout since we last visited. I know I talked about this last time that I wanted to change some of the backdrops, make them a little taller. And so here I have a brand new from Lark Products backdrop for Rico. This is Black Hawk Mountain. This is the view you would see if you looked east toward the city of Rico, town of Rico, whatever, from the other side of the river. So this is exactly what you would see behind the RGS facility at Rico. So, and that's a 24-inch high backdrop, replacing a backdrop that was only about 11 inches high. So made some serious progress there. And a number of other places I've made progress as well. So I've kind of been going through again and just making little refinements here and there. The backdrop is the one that's most obvious, but let's go take a look and see some of the things that I've been working on. Okay, so if you've been following my previous videos and my stuff online, you've probably seen the mill that used to sit here. It was a kit bash of a Grant Line East Terrible mill and an AHM freight depot, and that's what used to be here, and I'll show you a picture of that here. But it never really captured the feel for the real mill, the Rico Argentine Pro Patria mill. That was a very, very large mill that served many of the mines around Rico. And it was one of the bigger customers on the Rio Grande Southern and one of the last holdouts in terms of still shipping by rail. So I never really cared for how the mill came out. I didn't like the color, I didn't like the shape. It didn't really capture the mass or sort of the myriad of the little dormers that were popular on the real prototype. And if you want to see what the prototype looked like, you got to go to Banta Model Works and take a look at their Pro Patria mill kit, because that is a full-scale model. And as much as I like Banta kits, and I'd love to have built that, it would be, rough estimate, probably 4 times the size of what I have here, and just simply wouldn't fit the space. So I built a new version of this. So in the core here, there's still a Grant Line East Terrible mill, and then this, of course, these are parts of the ancillary buildings that come along with the mill, but the rest of it's pure scratch build. And it isn't a perfect match, but it's meant to capture a lot of the lines, the dormers, and so on, and the large loading shed of the original. So I feel like this. And I think the color too probably looks a little more natural, even though it's a styrene. Although these board-on-board roofs are made from wood. But anyway, I feel like this captures sort of the spirit of the Pro Patria mill better than the original one did. And in doing so, I changed this whole scene. So, hang on, I got to loosen this camera thing. There we go. So if you see down here, this is where the sampling works used to be. And you know what? That building doesn't look like the sampling works was described to be, the brick building that I used to have here. So instead, I replaced it with I moved the coal bins, the Rico coal bins. I'm going to lower this down here a little bit. And put that where the sampler used to be. And then I just filled in this space here with the low hill that continues on into the depot area at Rico, and so on. So we have, and I was able to raise this backdrop by about 2 inches, give it a little more mass, and then it sort of blends into the big backdrop here. Also at Rico, new kit here, this little kit right here, you can see the building in between with the shake shingles on it and the little lean-to in the back. This is a Wild West scale models kit. Honestly, it's not meant to represent any particular building. I love Wild West scale models kits, and it gave me the opportunity to build another one. I just popped it in there because it looked like it belonged. So I'm kind of on a 2-point sort of trajectory here. On the one hand, I'm really trying to make most of Rico much more realistic in terms of matching the prototype. But then I'm also sort of enhancing this freelanced town area as well. So, I mean, are those two trajectories at odds with one another? Maybe, but hey, it's a hobby and I'm having fun with it. And then here at Rico also, I don't know if this made the last update, but this is the actually the section house that sat at Dallas Divide. It's another Banta kit. I asked Bill Banta if he could fire me up another one. I did replace the roof because the Banta kit comes with roll roofing. I replaced it with some leftover rags to riches shingles. So it came out pretty well. It replaces the No Problem Joe's cabin from Grant Line that I used to have here. So it looks a lot more like a proper Rio Grande Southern section house. So we can see a little more of the front. Also, I've added more switch stands throughout the yards. So virtually every turnout, save for the one that's really close to the platform at Ridgeway, all have switch stands of some variety. Placerville is another area I've been working. So this is the Rags to Riches kit for the Placerville Depot, replacing the narrow gauge Colorado kit that I'd had there previously. And as I mentioned, the narrow gauge Colorado kit, there was nothing wrong with it other than that I had assembled it poorly. So being a fan of the Rags to Riches kit and wanting to support multiple businesses, I replaced it with the Rags kit, which unfortunately, Joe Fuss and Rags to Riches threw in the towel at the beginning of this year. So he decided, he and his wife Lori decided to retire. And unfortunately, these amazing kits are no longer available. So I'm glad I got what I got when I got it. And in fact, just as he was closing, this is the last thing I ordered here. This is the Placerville warehouse. So if you remember, I had a plastic Walters kit that sat here representing this warehouse. Well, this is the Rags to Riches kit, much more accurate. Love the doors, I love the platform. And I did change out the metal foil siding for some Wild West scale model siding. And now that I look at it, I use the extra wide stuff. I probably should have used the narrow stuff, but it still looks good enough for me. I think it definitely looks more like the RGS warehouse at Placerville, at least the one that was south of the depot, should look like. And then of course, I probably didn't do this kind of business with all this loose freight on the platform, but I think, you know, it kind of goes a long way toward helping things out to look like it's an active railroad doing active business. And to that end here, I've got number 25 here, the brass PSC, brass precision scale version of 25 here, which has Tsunami 2 on board and a Keep Alive capacitor. So, and also on that end, we're going to take a look at Ridgeway here. So you'll remember in one of my other videos, this is the model die casting 280. I introduced it, I think, 2 years ago in a layout update. And honestly, it never really ran well for me until just 2 weeks ago, I put a Soundtrax Current Keeper 2 in it. And now this thing runs as well as a Blackstone. You know, I had to tune the running gear a little bit more. It's a kind of a finicky thing, but putting that Keep Alive in there made all the difference in the world. And so now, and you can see the train that it's got. You know, it's a pretty long train there, and it's a fraction of the number of cars that this guy can pull. But now let's talk about the changes at Ridgeway. So, in the last layout video, I had told you that I had given up on the idea of trying to fit the Ridgeway yard office. Well, then along comes Mike McCarville and McCarville Studios, working with Banta, Bill Banta, to produce a resin and laser kit for the office building. And I thought, well, there's no way I can't get one, right? So I got one thinking, well, maybe I'll build that one as is, and then maybe I'll kit bash or scratch build a smaller version that'll fit the space a little bit better. Well, here, I'll move these cars out of the way for you. The kit just came out so nice, I couldn't help myself. I had to put it here. So I changed the tracks a little bit. So the track that has the coaches on it, I had to extend that track somewhat. I had to stub end another track that passed the roundhouse so that I could put this here. But I think it's worth it. Great looking building. It's still far enough away from the depot at Placerville that it kind of avoids the whole canyon effect. I was worried about having this too close to the platform and having it seem like the tracks were running through a canyon, because that's not really how Ridgeway felt. Ridgeway was pretty wide open spaces, and you know, I didn't want it to feel too crowded. It still is kind of crowded, not gonna lie, As you can see here, that building really kind of snuggles up close to the roundhouse, more so than the real thing did. In fact, the real thing is not next to, but north of the roundhouse. So I'm definitely playing with, playing with reality here, fitting the depot and the office in this orientation relative to the roundhouse. So yeah, Ridgeway Yard is getting kind of crowded. And I probably need to start keeping fewer cars on the layout at any one time. But for now, I just kind of have them all out, almost all of them anyway. But looking around Ridgeway, you can see, yeah, it's, so the real Ridgeway Yard and engine terminal was a relatively compact facility, which makes it modelable, right? One of the things I'm trying to do, though, is add a lot more of the sort of the engine parts and rusty debris and ties and so on that you see in those pictures of Ridgeway Yard in the 40s, when it really looked more like a junkyard than a rail yard. And to help emphasize the junkyard vibe, this is the Wiseman Model Services Derelict C16 kit. It's a urethane and white metal casting kit. You can build it up with as many parts on it as you want. I decided to keep some of the parts like the drive rods and the side rods and the crossheads and things off so that I could add them, scatter them about the yard. But as you guys probably know, from the late 20s on until 1942, there was a string of these derelict C16s looking like this just west of Durango. So I don't model Durangos, so I put one of them up here in Ridgeway, but this is RGS 12. It's not a perfect match for RGS 12, but fairly close in terms of what appliances she had, sort of around 1940. And you can actually look, I think it's gonna be hard to kind of show you here because of the lighting, but you can actually see the tube sheet behind the smoke box if you look in through the open door. Anyway, long story short, this is just helping to emphasize sort of the condition of the RGS in the era that I model. And of course, in 1942, this engine, along with about half a dozen others, were going to go off to become melted down for scrap for the war effort. But I leave it here just again as an indicator that the RGS, is sort of on its last legs here. And this is sort of the angle that gives away how crowded things are really in my in my Ridgeway Yard. This is the roundhouse here, and then this is the office, and you can see there's really no room in between the two. So not so prototypical, but only if you look at it from this particular angle. And does it bother me? Not really. Something else I mentioned as having bothered me for a while. From the last video, I talked about the masonite panel that covers the window in the basement here. And so I finally got around to painting up the replacement and putting it in place. It's held in place with industrial strength Velcro all around. So it still works as an emergency access panel. I could rip this down quite easily and climb out the window if necessary. But it does cover up the window now, so it makes photography easier, and it kind of controls the lighting in here a little bit better. So there's a lot of reasons why this is better, and it just took me a while to get around to doing it, but here it is, and it certainly, I think it makes a difference. So now on to what's next. Okay, so I'm looking at this area over by Ophir, and I realize, the transition to Lizard Head with the trees, it's nice and all, but I feel like Ophir looks flatter than it should. There should be more vertical rock walls. And, I talk about the fact that the vertical rock walls on the RGS that we always like to model, they are outnumbered by the number of miles running through open alpine meadow and open ranch land, right? But still, I felt like it's not representative enough of the actual terrain at Ophir. So I bought another one of these. This is you see it's a hard foam rock casting. And I'm going to try to find a way to kind of fit it in here. I know this looks really weird just holding it like this. Obviously, it's going to be blended in and tapered when I do it, but it definitely needs to have a little more rock here and then transition into the trees and then transition to Lizard Head. So that's something that I'm not sure if and when I'm going to do this, but it's definitely on the probable list. And the other bit, of course, that I always talk about, and I don't have any real plans to do, but I think about it a lot, is some sort of an abbreviated snow shed at Lizard Head. As we know, When we look at pictures of Lizard Head Pass on the Rio Grande Southern, we remember the massive snow shed that was up there. And the problem, obviously the logistical problems are, number one, it takes a tremendous amount of strip wood to build that. Number two, if you want to ever have access to those tracks again for routine track maintenance, rail cleaning, and so on, you've got to make it removable, which makes it much more difficult to build. And then thirdly, this is such a short segment here that would the snow shed look ridiculous because it would only be maybe 2 feet long. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence about this. Speaking of fences, one way I tried to get around that was at least to show the snow fence up here that gives at least some impression of the snow fighting and snow mitigation infrastructure that was in place at Lizard Head Pass. So let me know what you think in the comments. I know a lot of you would like to see me attempt to build a snow shed, but I mean, let's think about the total picture. Would it add to or subtract from the scene? Okay, so a couple more things to talk about at Rico in the future plans department. Possible future plans. So don't hold me to this. I know, and I get a lot of questions about, hey, what about that thing you said you were thinking about doing? Well, thinking about versus doing, two different things. But I want to consider that when I first built this version of Rico, I included this Grant line plastic ore loader. This is the ore loader that was at Silverton for many, many years. It had a ramp up to the back of it. Trucks would back up and dump ore. And there were a lot of ore dumps in the area around Rico, but none of them were enclosed like this. But I built it there because I thought, hey, that looks like a cool mine structure and I like it, it's interesting. But more and more, I want this station area around Rico to look like the real thing. And so I think that's gonna go. I bought a Durango Press truck ramp, like a dump ramp, that looks a lot more like one of the ones at Rico, because I think there were 3 at various times in history at Rico. Whether it's going to fit in that space or not is another question. But at least yesterday, I pre-stained all the wood with the expectation that at least I was going to attempt to build the ramp. And whether I install it or not, different story. And then the other thing too that impacts that is where the track would come off for the Rico coal pocket. And I've had a lot of questions about the Rico coal pocket. Of course, right now you can see all I'm doing is storing stock cars there. But Crystal River makes the kit now. Of course, I've scratch built quite a bit of things for the layout now, and maybe I'll try to scratch build it instead. I don't know. But eventually, maybe by the 2023 Narrow Gauge Convention, I may have the Rico coal pockets here. Don't know. Still would like to do it, but it hasn't bubbled all the way up to the top of my to-do list yet. But it would involve taking another turnout here, maybe up here, and then moving it so that it goes up the ramp, up to the coal pockets, and have the coal pockets about where these two stock cars are. So that does sort of change the geometry here a little bit, so it's easier said than done. And that's why I'm not sure if I can commit to replacing this coal bin with a ramp yet until I know what the turnout's going to look like in this space to feed the Rico coal pocket. So that's going to require some planning. Hey, the other thing that I've been meaning to do, and I haven't done yet, and I do apologize for that, is people are always asking me for updated versions of my track plan. And, I'm a big fan of Dave Meek and his Thunder Mesa layout, and I watched his video on how he creates track plans, and I actually bought the graph paper and the blue pencils and the French curves and all that to do it myself. I'm not, there's a lot of things I can do with software, but when it comes to track planning software, I'm not really all that skilled, and I really just prefer doing it myself with a pen and pencil. So I plan to do that. Maybe I'll make sure I do that this summer, but I actually am very busy this summer with a lot of travel and a lot of other commitments. So we'll see. But I would like to have an updated version of the track plan available for you guys, and then I can flash it at the beginning of these videos so that you can get some orientation. I mean, you kind of have some sense of how the layout is set up and how it's oriented just based on this, right? Here, let me turn this around here so you can kind of see some. 12 by 14 feet. It's a simple loop with a peninsula, no grades. But in terms of giving you orientation, how the towns are laid out and how the tracks are laid out, I'd like to have that, if for no other reason than for my own reference, and then I can submit that the next time I do a layout article for one of the magazines. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I've had a number of projects related to tuning locomotives and tuning rail cars and so on, and that's not really all that sexy for you. Oh, Locomotive. Yes, this guy has a tiny little DCC decoder in it, but this is the Toma Model Works HOn3 Porter. I lettered it for San Juan Central, the Tuco Ramirez. If you know, you know. But basically, this little guy here, it can pull a boxcar, believe it or not. I really wish I had more room for a keep alive, and maybe there's a way to do that. I just haven't figured it out yet. But this was just a fun little thing, you know. I think anytime I do anything that's freelanced, the fun thing about it is I can just slap San Juan Central decals on it, and then it's all good, right? So this definitely looks like something Malcolm might have done. I even got the elk antlers from a company called Mini Prints. So they're 3D printed antlers. And anyway, so that's kind of what I've been doing. Oh, and maybe I guess the other thing to show you is this guy here. It popped up in another video, but I added another Galloping Goose to the mix. And in here is another Soundtrack Tsunami 2. So it's got quite a bit of sound to it. And I lettered it up as number 3 would have looked sometime around the beginning of World War II. It has the Defense Finance, what do you call it? The Defense Supplies Corporation, sorry, stencils on it and so on. So I always like number 3 because if you can kind of see here, the Sunrise logo still has the stencil marks on it. So that's why I chose that one. So anyway, that's where we're at for now. I'm putting this back on the rails, and stay tuned for more updates and run-bys. Thanks.